Hi YouTube, and welcome to your Car Care Companion. Today's video is on how the ignition and charging system work. The ignition and charging systems work together and are interlocked. They share components, mainly the battery and the alternator, but they share other components and functions as well. The components of the ignition and charging system are the key, the battery, the starter, the alternator, the ignition coil or coils, the distributor or the computer, and the spark plugs. So what happens when you first turn that ignition switch, the key? Well, the electrical system of the car all starts with the electricity stored in the battery. When you turn the key closes the circuit from the battery to the starter. The key also closes the circuit from the alternator to the coils. The key closes the circuit from the battery and alternator to the accessories such as the lights, the heater, your dome light, your radio, and the ignition system. So if it all starts with the electricity stored in the battery, what does the battery do? Well, the battery does basically three things. One, it is used to supply electricity to the starter to start the engine. Two, when the engine is not running, it charges all your peripherals. It powers all the peripherals such as your dome light, your radio, your heater, your fan. It won't run the air conditioner because the engine needs to be running to crank the compressor. And the third thing that it does is it gets itself recharged by the alternator. And that's basically the job of the battery. How does the battery get recharged? Each time you start your car, a small amount of electricity in the battery is used to crank the starter to turn the engine over. Well, how does the battery get recharged? How does that electricity get replaced? Well, the alternator here, as we discussed in how the engine works as one of the components, is a small electric generator. And a serpentine belt turns this pulley right here and cranks this alternator, generating electricity, which goes back into and recharges the battery. While the car is running, the alternator runs all your auxiliary components such as your lights, radio, and it supplies the ignition system with electricity it needs for the ignition coils to fire the spark plugs. Now, if you start the car and the alternator is faulty or is not working properly, the car will continue to run off the battery and will deplete the battery. And once the battery is depleted, the car will stop running. So if your battery dies and your car will not start, one of the first things to check is the alternator. That can be done at just about any parts store. Auto parts stores generally will check your alternator to see if it's good or not for free. So what happens when you have alternator failure? The car will continue to run on the battery for a while. One or both of the headlights may dim. Usually you'll get one headlight dimming and one headlight still bright because of the way cars are wired. They're wired in series. So the wiring for the headlights will go from one headlight and then across to the other. And that's why one will be brighter than the other. So if you see your car or your family member's car with one headlight brighter than the other, you may have an alternator that has failed and the vehicle is running off of the battery and there's not enough power to make both headlights bright. That's one of the indicators. So you might want to get that checked. The car will eventually stop running altogether if it's running on the battery. And if it's run too low, the battery is run too low, there may be permanent damage and you may have to replace the battery as well as the alternator. Another indicator is that your alternator is failing, and sometimes intermittently and for no apparent reason, all of your lights in your dash will come on. Even when the car is running, all of them will come on kind of erratically. That's also an indicator that you may be experiencing a failed alternator.